I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you.
If you don't know who Unregistered and Thaddeus Russell is, well, then this podcast review is going to be a true gift for you. If you already know about that, maybe I can simply help represent him in a way and get you reacquainted. If you don't like him and you do know who he is, maybe there's a chance to convince you to try him out again. And maybe there's some of those old episodes you didn't know were packed way back in the catalog for Thaddeus Russell, Unregistered Podcast. Welcome to the Libertarian Podcast Review. We are here to review your liberty-leaning podcasts, critique them unnecessarily, and maybe help you find that autistic Liberty Star you didn't know you needed in your life. We compile these up, we try to get them out and give you a little bit of a review. Hey, give you a taste of what the show's about, give you some of their tangibles and their other qualities, and try not to be too harsh on them. I was told, this is, by the way, this is Tyler Yonke, Libertarian Podcast Review, Episode 6. We're going to review the Unregistered Podcast by Thaddeus Russell. I was told by my wife with the Keith Knight critique that I was a little harsh on him, which was not my intention. My intention, if anything, was to try to show the brilliance of this young guy and the great episodes that he has in his show, and that you should be a part of that as well. I was maybe a little hard on some of his production quality, but I think that's what makes Keith so unique is you can critique his production quality, and his quality of his actual show and his interviews are so good, they overcome anything else. And that was really my point of even bringing that out. Okay. Unregistered, maybe you've heard of it. Thaddeus Russell. He's a product of like the 60s community there in Berkeley. At least his parents were. They were quite subversive communists, I believe. He tells a story of growing up in Berkeley, split family. His parents were both very, very involved in the underworld of the social democratic socialist, I think is how they call them. He then went to an Ivy League. Like his dad was an engineer of some sort, former Mormon, pretty risque about the way he behaved in the house, kind of just let Thad do his own thing because they lived their communist beliefs. He then went to an Ivy League school, was very much a lefty of his own, socialist professor, I would imagine. Then he got dumped from academia after he wrote his Renegade History of the United States or somewhere around there. And he has since found a home, I believe, in the libertarian movement. And he's a libertarian adjacent, I would definitely say. And we'll go over his politics maybe in a little bit and maybe play some clips where you can discuss those himself. Who is Thaddeus? And maybe we go right to his own story. If you go to his own website, which is thaddeusrussell.com, my story, he's a little bit of a writer. So some of this is, he was born in Berkeley in 1965 to professional revolutionaries. My parents were members of the International Socialist and Marxist organization dedicated to creating a workers' revolution to help accomplish this goal. My mother took a job as a clerical worker at UC California to build a socialist secretary. My father organized a union as his fellow computer programmers in the Northern California headquarters of the National Forest Service, and managed to recruit a few geeks into the IS. Yikes. So look, they were true revolutionaries. He adopted atheism as a religion. It goes through here, and I would actually recommend, if you want to take a deep dive, or you can probably get a lot of this info just by listening to his podcast as well. And he found what if he went to Antioch College and Starkist form, or he was teaching there. Contradiction is that a theme of a renegade history. So he wrote this book about renegade history, and what that does, that book performs, is taking a look at some of the underground of American history, the people, the dandies, as he likes to call them, and just different walks of life, and how they actually participated and formed our history. And it's kind of the underworld. And then he decided to take that, and he created the Unregistered Podcast, which talks to a lot of these people nowadays. And, the people maybe you don't think you would want, and we'll listen to his introduction here, the people that maybe you don't think that this should be talked about or talked to in polite society, especially nowadays. This is quite a recurring theme. And then he also created his Renegade University, and that is kind of an online, and I found some things pretty really interesting. So his dive into basically creating his own university really has led him to rethink, I believe, the hierarchy and the structure of the public education system and education system itself. It's such an amazing thing that people really do rip on YouTube as an example. You get going down a rabbit hole of all kinds of subversive ideas. But with that, you can learn a lot. I mean, I've learned how to do all kinds of amazing things at my house, upkeep, maintenance, repairing things, build a giant chicken coop out in the backyard as an example this summer, and learn those tools and those secrets of how to do those things on YouTube. And it's the same with philosophy, same with education, all kinds of amazing things you can do. And he was doing that with his own online school there, Renegade University, but found the difficulty of everything that you have to do to set this school up and to be accredited. And it's really quite the sham. Anyway, I would suggest you look into that as well. So how did I found Thaddeus? If you look at episode 1, I do a little breakdown of my leaving the GOP back in 2016, a little bit before that actually. And I had always been libertarian leaning, had read Bastiat's book, The Law, back in 1999 for me, and always just had a strong limited government type of feel, which corresponds with the libertarians. But geez, they're wacky on all kinds of things, right? You can't go down that route. But when I left the GOP, I went into the world of Reason magazine and was trying to just figure out what else is there out there for libertarians, not really knowing much, and found Camille Foster I found Matt Welch and the Fifth Column podcast. They were talking about that, and I went over there. Found about Camille Foster. Camille Foster led me to a few others like Michael Malice and Unregistered Podcast. And holy crap, I think I jumped in right around when Thaddeus was on episode like 3 or 4. So I was able to listen to, go back and hear episode 1 of Michael Malice, Camille Foster on episode 3. And it just went through this litany of love for Thaddeus Russell's podcast and his guests. One thing about Thaddeus Russell that people, and I just saw this posted on one Facebook page the other day, was kind of mocking him about, not mocking him, but he's big onto postmodernism. And if you really take a dive into postmodernism, you learn about it, at least from me early on, was, Jordan Peterson, Glenn Beck are talking about the evils of this and totally on board with a lot of that. And then you get Thaddeus Russell, whom I all of a sudden have respect for, and he's arguing for it. And what I love about Thaddeus on this is he argues from a place of good faith. So he had a Stefan Molyneux. He had a debate with him about postmodernism. He had one with Bob Murphy, and I didn't think it went well for Bob. I'm a big fan of Bob Murphy. Probably agree with him more than I would with Thaddeus Russell, and I didn't think it went well. I don't know if he was as prepared. He had arguments for it, and that was more than up for that challenge. So you can lose the debate, as I think Bob Murphy easily lost that debate, and still perhaps be right? It just doesn't mean you lost the debate. But I think Thaddeus Russell really has changed my mind about some of the postmodern thing. He says, hey, the current ones now have changed the true meaning of the Foucault and what that whole idea meant. I'm not sure I'm all on board with him, but what I do think is that the postmodern issue, at least how he presents it, it's almost ironically the scientific method, which is you are constantly researching and not necessarily believing the outcomes that you've got on the scientific method of testing, and things can change. So we've seen that with all kinds of things over in the last few years with everything. So his postmodernist issues are fascinating to me. I don't always agree, and I love how he pushes his guests. So let's get into maybe a little bit about his actual show. And once again, check out Unregistered Renegade University. Maybe we'll start here with an episode with Michael Malice on the Unregistered Podcast, episode 1.
Okay.
I think it is an acting out of a drama inside of us that originated most likely, not always, but most likely, usually in childhood.
I think our childhoods are so complex and extend so much throughout time. It's very easy to take a political expression and just latch it on to some childhood expression, but correlation is not causation.
Absolutely. And that's done way too often and too easily. It's a cheap way to dismiss political opponents. And I hate it when people do that to me. They do it to me all the time. They say I'm acting out an Oedipal struggle with my parents who were leftists. And I hate that, but I do, but I think we can do it in a more intelligent, sensitive, important, meaningful way.
Okay.
So one of the things that I've read lately that I like the most was Ego and Hubris.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
My biography.
Yeah. And I want this podcast to be somewhat akin to that. I mean all the episodes in this podcast.
Universal praise.
Yeah. Okay.
We had 100% positive reviews. I personally did not, but the book did. I was shocked.
It should. It's fantastic. Everyone should read that. And I wish our political culture would do more of that. And this is one of the things I want to do with this podcast is, I hate this. I know it only because it was misused, but I want to use it anyway to make the political personal and the personal political. I know, terrible second wave feminist.
Ultimate enemy.
I know, but
That's exactly what I'm against. Okay.
Well, I don't care. You're my prisoner, so you're going to do what I say.
Okay.
I know you like that too.
Yeah, you really think I'm a bottom?
Goes without saying. So,
sweetie.
All right. No, do you mind doing the story? Your story?
I mean, I don't mind, but what do you mean specifically?
Yeah, let's start from the beginning because a lot of people won't know it.
Okay.
Who haven't read.
And I'm going to wait there and let you figure out what that is about. And you can go check out episode 1. We're going to play a few more clips here, but I thought before we did so, and I just give you a brief understanding there of Thaddeus Russell and kind of his interview style quickly with someone, Michael Malice. This is episode 1. And already you can see that he's got a nice little comfort level pushback with people. And that's what I do like. He doesn't necessarily let them BS, but he doesn't call them out, and it's not antagonistic. It's just really good interview. So I also want to play just his intro here to any of the shows he has and kind of give you an understanding of how he introduces the show himself. And maybe give you, look, he does a bunch of ads here as well. So we'll have to go way back before he was really doing the ads and play a little bit of the intro to make sure that we get the exact right caption of a show. Now, look, here we go. Here's his intro, and then we'll talk about his music and everything else.
This is the Unregistered Podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think.
All right. Intro there, people that make him think, and basically he does that well. So let's just talk a little bit about the production and go through those things. I mean, it's what it is, right? He does a great job of explaining what his show's about. He has intro music, unregistered theme produced by Clint Party. Check out his new album, Party Down, featuring some of the top rappers from the Pacific Northwest. Well, there you go. So it's obviously production, audio engineer Gabriel Montgomery on a lot of those early ones. He's also, he's been doing them by video now and Zoom with he just had started doing video before COVID hit, and now he's going to have to do that. He's doing them by Zoom, so not much of a big deal there. But the sound quality is still excellent for everything he does. There's done editing. He does insert ads in some of these, some CBD stuff, and other things about his unregistered university. Timeliness of the topics. He definitely gets to the timely issues that we have of the day, but a lot of things he talks about are, in a sense, philosophical. So you have a great array of people from the far left, from the far right, and in the middle, libertarian spectrum, socialist. I mean, the whole gamut he's run here, and it's really good. So he also has a Patreon, another tiered private groups, Renegade University joining up there. His outro, another parts of his show. Once again, same music and very well done. And his videos are well done as well. So it started from day one. It's not like the show where we're constantly learning and try to do things. He had a group of people and he's got a good set of resources for him to go to. Tangibles about the show. I mean, his interview style is second to none. First of all, he's very informative. He's very knowledgeable. So he could probably come across as a little cocky to some people. Now, I'm coming from this perspective of just actually really enjoying the show. I don't enjoy every episode. I'll tell you that. I mean, they're a little more in the long form that you'd see on a Rogan style, but they're a little bit different for the fact that they just go down different types of things. Rogan, has more of a conversation. These are definitely conversations, but they are a little more highbrow to an extent. He can definitely riff and give his opinions. We just heard there with Michael Malice, and we'll give a few more of those. Super smart, knows his stuff. Yeah, somewhat humorous. He does do a great job, I think, of letting you into his personal space. Talks about, divorce, talks about his kid, his son, talks about specific issues with his son, but he also pushes his guests on those exact same issues where you start to talk about something and he's like, oop, he's almost like a psychiatrist or psychologist or whatever it is, and starts digging about your childhood and things that maybe have made you like this. So I find that very perceptive and engaging in effect. And you once again, you listen to these people all the time. I mean, if I were happen to come upon, and this is a problem I know with famous people, if I were to happen to upon Thaddeus in the wild, I'd probably think he's my friend because I know him, right? You'd go up to talk to him or something like that. I mean, that's not the truth. He doesn't know me from Adam. But you get to know these people a lot from their conversations. And I think it's hard for you to really lie about your own personality. There's things about, Alex Jones and his showmanship on his show. I get that. But when you're having conversations like you have here with Thaddeus Russell, I think you're probably getting to know most likely the real person. Does that mean that he's great off camera? No, I don't know anything about him other than that, but he can be caustic, but in his own way. And there's some really, some good interviews with him. Dave Smith, Thaddeus Russell, and Nick Gillespie all had a little sit down in New York before COVID hit. And it got a little contentious with Nick and Dave, but it was quality stuff. His ease of speaking, yeah, he obviously does that research of his host. He always knows his things. How about of his libertarian scale? He just did an interview with Lions of Liberty and talked about that. I mean, he's definitely embraced by the libertarian crowd. But I have a friend on Facebook that is, I would say, probably socialist, but he posts stuff about Thaddeus all the time too. And, Thaddeus has definitely moved himself. I would say probably more into the ANCAP without labels, maybe just anarchist label, like you would have Michael Malice describe himself as. But with that, does he lend himself to being a shareable podcast with normal people, normies, as we would say? I would say definitely, because he runs the gamut and he gives these people an outlet. Now, I know that's dangerous, right? Oh my God, he had Curtis Yarvin on there, and Curtis, he's an alt-right. Is he? I don't know. But he also had Abby Martin, total socialist. So he will run the gamut of all these. And I think personally, you can see him moving more and more from his socialist background to more liberty, and probably on this spectrum now of just like, hey, the state is not the solution. I don't necessarily know what it is, but it's not the solution we're looking for. Conspiracy theory content. He's backed up with yes, I guess in a sense, but it's always with historical content and evidence. What's interesting, like you look at his Renegade Renegade History of the United States book, that probably a lot of that you might think is conspiracy theory stuff in there, but it's just stuff that has been washed away, and so he, as a historian, he brings it to light, and you may think it's a conspiracy theory, but I would say don't ignore what he has to offer just because you might not like the initial context of what it is. Okay, so we played a little clip there, Michael Malice on the Unregistered Podcast. I'm going to play a few more clips, and with that, I'm not going to play them all because I just want to give you an idea of where Malice is on
ego and hubris.
Too soon there, of kind of where you're going to, what you're going to see about some of these episodes, and actually give you an idea.
In hubris, you describe yourself as being brilliant, or knowing, more importantly, that you knew that you were brilliant when you were very, very young.
Okay, these are problems you have with podcasts like mine, where we're doing record him live.
So I love that in a lot of ways. I did not know if I was particularly intelligent until my dissertation defense.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you're writing a dissertation, you're far above average already.
At Columbia. Yeah. No, I did. It wasn't until that day, that meeting, when I had 5, eminent scholars surrounding me at this table and talking about this thing I had written. It wasn't until then when I found myself that I was actually on top of them.
Yeah.
I was actually, for the first time, I felt like I was actually in charge of the conversation and teaching them, and they knew less than I did. But until then, really, and I was 34 or something like that. I didn't really know I was smart.
That's sad.
I wasn't sure. I didn't think I was dumb, but I didn't know where I was between average and exceptional. And we can talk about why, but I love that about you, that you don't seem to care whatsoever about humility.
Oh, I don't think that's true.
Modesty. Well,
humility and modesty.
I want you to not care.
I do care about humility.
Those are bourgeois values, right, of the 19th century, and we talked about Hamilton.
I think humility is the reason I'm an anarchist is because of humility. I don't believe in imposing my political positions on anyone else.
Different. That's different. I mean the idea of
false humility, like deception.
No. So one of the cardinal bourgeois virtues is modesty. That you're not self-aggrandizing. You shouldn't be self-aggrandizing. You shouldn't. I'm
going to let that play out, and we'll go to the next one. Once again, I'm just giving some clip ideas here of how I think his interview style plays out, and the kind of the brilliance of some of what Thaddeus Russell ends up giving with his interviews. Keep going here.
For hard work as a moral, duty, which I retain to this day. I hate that expression, like, well, I worked hard for this. I don't care. I'd rather you be productive.
So, I am constantly refusing to identify as libertarian.
Well, I don't use that word either.
I know you don't either. Yeah. Another thing I like about you. And one of the reasons I don't is that it seems to me, I could be wrong, it seems to me that many libertarians have internalized the Protestant work ethic.
Yes. Yes.
That, let's define this for the listeners, and you do it beautiful. And it stunned me when I saw this in your book. And it was published in 2006, so you had not had any encounters with me in any way before you wrote this. You said that I did not have the Protestant work ethic as a child. I did not think work in itself was a virtue.
Yes.
I thought of it only as a means to achieve one's goals.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Stunning. Like, I never see that. I never see people thinking that. I never see people saying that, except, my students,
right,
after I've taught them this for months and months. Wow. So how did that happen? Because this culture, and in particular, the American immigrant culture, pounds that into our heads.
But I was in a yeshiva, right? And my household was Soviet. So here's one of the early things.
I'm going to let you go and find this episode. And once again, Michael Malice has been on the Unregistered Podcast for, I want to say 4 or 5 times, maybe 3-4 times. And with that, every time you get a real fascinating interview. One of the other ones I'm going to go and just start to play some clips here is one of Camille Foster, who is also similar to me, of kind of a Michael Malice type. But he's black, but doesn't recognize
that. I've been studying American history for, 30 years now, and professionally for 30 years, and with a particular focus on race. And I've written quite a lot about race in the United States, and obviously read a lot. I would say, this is for sure. In the last 5 years, I've probably learned more about race, or you've made me rethink my ideas about race more than anyone else, by far. There's no question. So, and actually, there's a review that I wrote of Elizabeth Hinton's book on the origins of mass incarceration for Reason. It's coming out very soon.
which is very good. I've had a preview.
Yeah, it's very good because Camille Foster influenced a lot of it. Not all of it. I won't give him credit. I won't give him credit for all of it. But
I don't even see the parts in it that I influenced. I mean, I agreed with all of it. That's for damn sure. But I mean,
we can go over that.
Great, excellent, extraordinary work that I am. To the extent I had anything to do with it at all, I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, no. As I was writing it, and man, it was hard writing that one. It was really, I did a lot of work for that one. But as I was writing it, you were in my mind a lot, and you guided me to some conclusions.
Just an idea there of the influence that he will acknowledge other people giving him, which I think is, he just talked about humility with Michael Malice, and then you get something like that, and you're like, that to me is someone who's always willing to learn and redirect, and he's come to different conclusions on things such as the next topic, which is cops.
Assessment. And other times it's because they're just not available yet. And in this particular case, it wasn't available, but it's a problem when people aren't interested in going any further because they've got their predisposition is to believe this thing about race and cops. So, yeah.
So I was listening to that interview, and when you said that, I immediately thought, Camille, you got to say something else, because when you leave it there, and I've told you this, sometimes you leave your critiques there. You're right that it could.
And if you listen to later on, Thaddeus then discusses his change of his thoughts. And here we go.
Those are some of the reasons why I'll probably have to eventually write some sort of treatise like Hayek's Why I'm Not a Conservative that would sort of make sense out of all of that. But
why I'm not a Black conservative.
Yeah.
Right. Unfortunately, you have to do that though.
Because I'm not either one of those things. I don't self-identify as Black. I'm certainly not conservative.
Quickly, is this right? I mean, Black conservatives and conservatives generally, their answer to things like shooting people in the streets is we need more cops and more aggressive policing.
Right. And you need to respect the police.
More prisons and tougher laws.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your answer, I am assuming, is that ultimately we actually need fewer cops, fewer laws, less aggressive policing, and maybe at the end of the road, since you're an anarchist, apparently, maybe none of those things, maybe no cops, no prisons, no laws. Yeah. I mean, at least move toward that.
Yeah. So there is a whole world that one can imagine with respect to like what things would look like where there were men angels and there was no government whatsoever. I used to do a lot more thinking about what that world might look like than I do today. Like Milton Friedman's son, whose name is escaping me right now. David Friedman. Yes. Thank you. Who wrote Machinery of Freedom, sort of imagines some of those potential worlds. And I think that's interesting. I think it's a cool exercise. I don't know what things would actually look like in a world where there wasn't any government. I'm not interested in sort of the abolition of laws, generally speaking. Some laws are important, like thou shalt not kill is entirely consistent with my crazy radical anarchist.
But don't you want to at least reduce this?
Absolutely, I want to reduce those
in our lives.
Absolutely,
okay.
yeah.
Right. So
which is why, I mean,
so that's what
there's so much stuff to do before I get to sort of there are no laws and there are no prisons.
I'm not going to say you need to do this.
That's a great comment, and it reminds me actually of an interview with Glenn Beck and Penn and Teller, where he talks about like, hey, look, we have a lot we can agree on right now to get to before we have to start determining whether there's a state that exists or not, being on the anarchist side. So many things that the conservatives, or if you have liberty in your life and you want to get to that eventual end, let's start working on those things that unify us and get us towards more and more liberty. And then we can start chipping away, and rather than just have to go straight for the anarchist style, which I'm all for, but I mean, come on. I was going to say once though, this conversation later on, if you follow the progression of Thaddeus Russell, he changes his ideas a little bit more along the lines of Camille, and saying how many white people are in jail as well. And that perhaps it's not a racist thing as much as it's just an authority thing. And I learned from this, arguing the Kaepernick thing that what I started doing with some of my lefty friends. And you take a different tone where you're like, hey, if if you think all cops are racist, why are you insisting that they're going and policing these areas for drug crimes? If they're just racist, they're going to be doing racist things. Stop having all these laws. And I thought it was a very good way to kind of overcome that. Look, Thaddeus has also had some very interesting people in here. Gavin McInnes.
In Midtown Manhattan.
Episode 6.
So I've been following you for a long time, Gavin.
I heard a rustle in the bushes outside my master bedroom window last night.
It was me, yeah. I've been following you for a long time because I've been very intrigued by you. And
were you the guy on the train?
No, only the bushes. I only do bushes.
Starts out right away, and it doesn't get any worse. It just gets better. The whole interview is fascinating, actually. And we'll keep going on some other clips.
One has more facts. There was one time, David Cross and I did an 8-ball, and we talked for maybe 15 hours about this. And it was free school lunches, which I think are stupid. Mm-hmm. It's not the state's job to feed your kids. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, 80 cents. There's water at the school. Bums can get $10 for vodka. You're getting your kid a lunch. Sorry. And he disagreed, and we hashed it out, and each of us had all the facts. I think this program in New York is $7 million in debt, and it doesn't work. And, even with Michelle's free lunch program, they end up throwing it all out because it's gross. But anyway, we had all of the data, the exact same data, and we had totally different views after the end of the 8-ball at 4 a.m. And that's the only time I think in my life where both guys had the same amount of data and still disagreed.
Yeah.
Every other time of the other million times, it's been one guy not knowing as much as the other guy.
Wait, so you think that the more data you have, the closer to truth you are?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
So it's like science.
So then like the phone book would be the most truthful book.
It is, as far as a compendium of names in the area and what their phone numbers are. Yes.
Right. But
it's definitely the most. I would rely if I was going to have a debate with a telephone book and the subject was people in the area and their phone numbers, I think you should err on the book side. It's going to know more than me on that particular subject.
Mm-hmm.
I love that exchange, the pushback, and the realization that things are maybe different.
Woman, husband, wife structure is the perfect scenario for a child because that's what makes us who we are. I'll give you an example. I was at the airport and this kid had shot himself.
Nice.
I was fucking him in the ass and he got a distended
wow,
anus.
You had to go there.
Someone had called the cops on me, and that was my last day before trial. No, he had a shart, as we are wont to do.
I see.
I think every man shits himself once a year.
Never heard of it.
I just had my annual one about a week ago.
Okay.
Anyway, his dad is in there, and I can hear the kid crying. And he's like, "What the fuck is the matter with you? God damn it! We're at the airport. You can't control your bowels."
Oh, that was me. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm at the point now, I'm looking at their shoes and I'm like, do I have to intervene? This kid's getting abused. He just had a shart, dude. And he's like, God damn it. You can hear him like take the underwear off and throw him in the toilet. He has to clean the shit off the kid's legs, and the kid's crying. He's probably 7 or 8, the age where you should have control over your bowels. And then I watch the shoes, and it doesn't go to the level where I should intervene. And then I see them go back to the gate, and I can tell by the shoes who it is. And the little boy goes up to his mom, and the dad's mad, and he grabs his phone, and he just crosses his legs and looks away from the kid and checks his tweets. And the mom sits there and holds him and hugs him. And they were both right. Don't shit your pants, okay? If you can feel if it's air or diarrhea, so hold your bowels in. If there's any question, sit on a toilet. So the dad was right to be mad. The mom was right too. Look, accidents happen.
That story could also be in relation to President Biden right now. Shat himself, needs someone to comfort him and also to yell at him. We'll go through a few more quotes. Once again, I think the Gavin McInnes is a good interview. Give these people platforms is often seen as dirty, but there's nothing better than, especially with Thaddeus Russell, airing out and really digging into these issues. If you're a controversial person, push them on those areas and see what you actually get instead of just them, little sound bites here and there, in a much deeper conversation. One of the ones that I really found good was Brett Venant of the School Sucks podcast. And
John Dewey's schools,
we'll talk about that one here.
Today's schools, we need to make those 5-year-olds ready to work when they get out of those schools 12 years later.
Yeah.
They have to be ready to work and they have to be ready to serve the country. And also, we haven't even talked about this, they have to be trained to obey authority. They have to be trained to follow the laws, right?
Yeah.
So now some of those things might be good. Working isn't always bad, depending on the ends. Serving the country is not my cup of tea, but for some people it might be.
Sure.
Following rules and laws and obeying authority, yeah, again, I'm not so sure about that, but again, it may be necessary in certain circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. All the way through, and certainly at the beginning of that process, there is no 5-year-old on earth who wants to do any of those things.
Of course not.
So how do we get them to do it? Now, here is what happened before modern schooling. We whipped them.
Mm-hmm.
We beat our children to force them to do those things. And we found out by the 19th century that wasn't so effective.
No, it wasn't effective, and it still is not effective. And good interview. I didn't really let you get to hear his guest there, but there's some really interesting stuff on school. And I think it's, for me, I've pushed back on my kids, teaching them to be skeptical, not cynical, but skeptical about their teachers. Just because that's a person of authority in that spot does not mean that they are correct. Matter of fact, as Michael Mellis says, it's usually the low paid person, low IQ person in front of the room doing the work, trying to teach your kids. Okay, let's go on. Glenn Lowry was a guest on his show. Very good interview. It was a little bit odd at times because I don't know if Glenn actually knew who
this guy, he's
Thaddeus is, but
guy.
it's a good one.
And he said, "Come on, write for our magazine. Come on, and
Origins
come
of the
into
Iraq
fold,
War.
Commentary, magazine. Norman Podhoretz, when you said you used to get beat up in the mixed neighborhood that you were, I was thinking about My Negro Problem and Ours, which was his classic essay of Podhoretz.
I think that essay is the origin of the Iraq War.
That
I think.
what kind of?
We'll leave it at that. And let's go to a Dave Smith one here.
People understand that even with podcasting, that's still incredibly impressive. And there's so many comics
getting success.
And I know you wish you were another comic,
of course, yeah.
but just to get to that level is an amazing achievement.
Well, thank you.
You know
I appreciate that. Yeah, it was not easy, but it's the only thing in my life that I ever really took it's like taking and really building from scratch and putting a decade plus into it.
Yeah.
But I'm really enjoying and you're having it now.
You say what you want for a living.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Quite an achievement.
It's amazing how many people I know who are like college professors don't have that fucking freedom. Even tenured professors, sometimes they're scared to say,
oh yeah.
Was there a guy who and this is, look, you can feel however about the transgendered issue or I know whatever is your relativist views on things, but there was this guy, I'm blanking on his fucking name, which isn't, you're always smarter when you remember a name for reference. Anyway, what's his name said, but he was talking about, so he said in his class, and he said okay, I identify as a 5-foot Asian woman,
right?
Okay, who has raise your hand if you have a problem with this statement.
Mm-hmm.
And he said no hands go up, no hands go up. And then he had an anonymous survey later that said, asked people anonymously, why didn't you raise your hand, or what did you say? And they said the answer overwhelmingly was just that I didn't want to get shit for it. Of course we all have a problem with this, but I don't want to get shit for it. And that, no matter how you feel about the issue, that is a big problem that exists on a college campus.
Once again, Dave Smith, brilliance as always, laying it out for the truth hammer that he is. By the way, always curious about how he cusses so much on his show, then flips over to going on CNN or now Fox Business, and doesn't let the F-bombs fly. But he was on Tim Pool's IRL podcast and had 2 F-bombs go there. So maybe he's slipping in COVID. That is Dave on several times, Scott Horton multiple times, a debate, like I said, with Stefan Molyneux. One of my favorite episodes with Swami Prem Naren. This is from the, and I'm just going to play a few clips here, try to get through these short here, from the documentary Wild Wild Country, close to where I grew up.
If you are one of the many people who have seen the new Netflix documentary Wild Wild Country, which is enormously popular, you'll know my guest this week. He was born Philip J. Tolks in Southern California, but for the last 40 years, he has gone by Swami Prem Naren. In the 1980s, he served as chief counsel of the Rajneesh spiritual movement and organization, and for its leader, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who is known by his disciples as Osho. The Rajneesh movement was the biggest and one of the last of the so-called cults of the 1970s and 1980s. At the peak of the movement, there were 30,000 disciples of Rajneesh who lived in communes all across the world. They were called sannyasins. They were known for their red and orange clothing, which represented the colors of the sunset. They helped popularize in the West the practice of spiritual meditation. And they were also known for their belief in personal liberation and their rejection of Western norms of repression, in particular sexual repression. But there were also hundreds of thousands of followers of Rajneesh, people who were deeply influenced by his teachings and his writings, who did not wear the red and the orange. In 1981, the Rajneeshis purchased an enormous ranch in northeastern Oregon and built an entire civilization there. Some 5,000 people lived at Rajneeshpuram from 1981 to 1986. And the story of that place and its conflict with the United States of America is the subject of Wild Wild Country. Through much of that time, Osho was in seclusion, detached from most of it.
And I'll let you check that out a little bit more. But that was a place that was, I want to say, about 2 hours from where I grew up. And so it was very fascinating to me to know at the time. Well, here's more.
As she advanced in power, she became more and more dictatorial and closed and authoritarian.
She sort of established her own church in a way within.
Well, more than in a way, she's the one who did it.
Yeah.
And what was clear to me, what became clear to me, was that the United States government was out to get us. And when the United States government is out to get you, they're probably going to get you.
Yeah. Fascinating interview with Swami Prem Narayan. And like I said, growing up there, I did not understand the influence. Look, crazy people. Of course, you want the government just come in and wipe them out. And then watching the Wild Wild Country gave me a different flavor. But listening to the podcast with Thaddeus Russell really taught me to think differently, which I've done, by the way, about Waco as well.
The government's going to know about it instantly, and they're going to arrest his ass. It's just not a tactically good decision to make. But it turned out later, we found out the government had blocked communication with the plane. We couldn't get hold of the plane. So when the plane put down in Charlotte, which is where a woman who was a close disciple of Osho, rich woman, owned a bunch of property, had a place where he could stay until the thing got worked out. They had a bunch of people there and arrested him at gunpoint.
As you said, when the federal government wants to get you, they will get you.
By and large, that's true.
Yeah.
If they're willing, if you step back and think about it, compared to killing Allende, how big a deal is it? Compared to overthrowing governments, how big a deal is it? Compared to invading and taking over Iraq because we want their oil, certainly not for human rights reasons. Yeah.
This guy speaks truth to power in a sense, but what I would not get confused with, he's not a libertarian, Swami Prem Narayan. And so it's always interesting to see someone that was threatened by the federal government, went to court with them. He was their lead attorney, and still probably pursues the ideas of the federal government being in control of your life in many aspects. But still,
this book, at least that's the idea.
Yeah.
Last
to
bit.
that end, I would like to return to the beginning in a sense, which is the moment when you went to India, right? You left your life and you went.
By the way, the interview is very emotional to this gentleman many times. And I think he tears up even.
You had children, you were a big shot lawyer.
Pretty simple. I burn out. I was working way too hard for way too long. I was drinking way too much. I was doing a fair amount of the Bolivian marching powder. And it just became unsustainable. So like I said, I just said, okay, I got to have a break. and I took a leave of absence, and then that turned into me resigning my partnership.
3.5 hour podcast with Swami Prem Naren. Check it out. There's some good parts there. And I think some of that you can understand is, why does someone get burnt out doing nose coke, all these things, and goes and finds a religion, maybe a cult at this sense. Find something in your life that's meaningful, family, a God, whatever, and that will help keep you grounded and keep you away from a cult, which at this point I just call the state. Okay. Debate with Ken Popehat White at the Soho Forum. He did great there. Another one, this guy Joe, cannabis farmer in Humboldt County. That was really good. If you want one that's maybe the conspiracy theory, is the interview with John Ziegler. He's kind of a conservative guy, but he has a whole thing about University of Penn with their football team and Sandusky. And you want the guy shows receipts. It's an amazing interview, and I've heard John Ziegler on other things. It is a tough one to not buy what he says, and also a tough one to want to preach from the high tops about that he's truthful, because you're going to be laughed out of this world. Check that one out. That's episode 84. Last one I'll probably do here is Abby Martin, socialist on the show. Her brother had been on there before. She's been on Joe Rogan's podcast. She's the one that called Tulsi Gabbard a toady, that Tulsi Gabbard didn't know what that meant. And she was on Joe Rogan. I mean, sorry, she's been on that too, but she's been on Thaddeus Russell's here.
What I do know is
check this out.
I think that capitalism is not working for the world, especially not for America. I think that pop culture and entertainment is a good effect of whatever the fuck this system has created here. That's like the one benefit, that we have some pretty cool music and art coming out of
not the only benefit. The bridges are pretty good,
The bridges are pretty good. Oh my God, are you kidding me? Everything's falling apart. The infrastructure is
the ones that are built by the government. Yeah.
Oh, come on. I mean, the whole argument of we should give the government less power and give corporations more, I think, is absurd.
Oh, I'm not making that argument. All right, let's because I think we're nearing maybe the end here. I want to talk about culture, a different kind of culture. Well, maybe it's not. I don't know. But this is something I bet you're rarely, if ever, asked. Although I warned you before I sent an email about this. I didn't know this until I started doing a little more research on you before this interview. You're an artist.
Yeah.
You're a painter primarily. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have a whole website that's full of paintings.
Yes.
You've been a very busy artist and painter. You've produced
all right,
quite
so
a bit.
Abby Martin goes on
prolific.
there, kind of missed some of that, but she uses socialism version to kind of rip on capitalism. And once again, previously in this interview, she kind of defines what socialism means. And so it's an odd one here, but here's kind of her best dichotomy clip of the day. And by the way, this is maybe one of the worst episodes as far as cringeworthy on the other side, but I think from his upbringing and his own knowledge,
I believe in everything that these people believed in,
Sure.
and I can argue to the death for them. I think that's kind of a restrictive.
That's why we're talking. I wouldn't talk to you if you were one of those people. No, I just wanted to throw that out there for maybe you to chew on. I mean, I think there's a reason that Fidel and Che were opposed to rock and roll and all forms of they banned American pop culture. The Soviet regime did too. North Korea, of course, does as well. I think they did see it as a threat because they see there's all those things we like, kind of personal, individualistic, primal freedom in that kind of pop culture that is counter to any kind of discipline, whether it's capitalist industrial discipline, right? Capitalists don't want their workers in their cubicles watching YouTube videos, right? They don't want the workers in their cubicles thinking about what's on TV. It's the same here, right? Even under capitalism, I agree with you there. Any regime that wants order, efficiency, control to some extent of the populace is going to be hostile to that kind of popular culture.
How does she fight back and
right?
defend
Where
socialism?
It's just anarchic, dancing, fucking, drinking, playing, partying, that kind of stuff, right? And that's what I promote, actually, is sort of the lowbrow culture just being disseminated. We don't have to do anything about it. Just let it go. People love it, and they're consuming it all across the world against all odds. Like in North Korea, they're bringing in like sacks full of USB or flash drives that are full of basically the internet and television shows and music videos, and they're distributing it in North Korea. I mean, even there, and that's what's much more popular than the Kim regime or communism.
Yeah, no, I just think I think it's completely separate. I think to say that we either need one or the other, I think is a wrong approach. I mean, why can't we have both?
We could have socialism and pop culture and twerking.
It's always worked.
I don't know. I don't know. I think socialism and twerking don't go together. I think there's an inherent hostility between the two, antagonism between the two. I really do.
Why can't we have an economy that works for everyone, be a part of that economy without having this kind of restriction?
Because socialism requires
fundamentalism,
discipline and work, right? To make it work. Everybody's got to participate.
So does capitalism. I mean, what do you
definitely,
mean?
absolutely. Yeah, but it's different. Socialism requires that all of us have that consciousness, that we all subsume some part of our individual identity to the collective, right? We have to put away our individual needs and desires to work for the collective. And the collective, the obligations are bigger under socialism, aren't they, than under capitalism? Because we are responsible for the whole society, aren't we, as the ruling class?
I mean,
the working
participation, absolutely.
There you go. And I'm just going to stop on that one because it reminds me, Michael Malice just interviewed a refugee from North Korea, and her comment was, we don't ever talk about I, it's always we. So everything that's the social justice, what's the social contract or social something theory that Wilson came up with, that the country's soul is dependent on your soul. So everyone is mixed in. You see this with the mass right now. It's not about personal agency. It's really about each person being involved in your salvation is dependent on how I act, and on and on and on. She's got that with the socialism thing. She likes all these, twerking and what have you, but understanding that those things are the first to go once the people are in power. Why? Because you then get to dictate and legislate under socialism or hardcore communism, what principles basically are allowed, what morality is. You're legislating that. Whereas in a free society, it's all about consent. You just ignore people and go about your will. Anyway, check that one out. That was episode 104, 112, Cody Wilson, Defense Distributed. Very good one there, because he pushes him on the issues of the child. We'll just leave it at that. Curtis Yarvin's been on a few times. Aya Gruber was a fascinating law professor from Boulder, talking about sex and feminism. And I didn't think I would like that, but man, I really did. And it was one that was happened first at
this
COVID.
Idea that women are naturally uninterested, or certainly less interested in sex than men. Mm-hmm. That a good woman is a pure woman. Mm-hmm. And so what you show in your book is that they punished rapists, but they also were not interested terribly in punishing rapists who had raped women who were promiscuous, who were not pure women, right? And that's where the sort of traditional feminist notions about this history actually make sense, right? Or that actually comport with the evidence, right?
Right. So it was very interesting, because when you look at the temperance movement leaders, Susan B. Anthony, Frances Willard, they really did have, sort of this regressive streak. And this is the one that they usually come under fire from feminists and more liberal people of, middle class marriage norms, productive means of work within marriage, sort of sexless and God-fearing. But there was a real part of that was actually feminist. So I have one of these speeches from Susan B. Anthony, her home protection speech. And she really does talk about a feminist problem, which was that some of the most marginalized women were stuck in the home while their husband laborers went out and they partied all night and they got drunk, and they would be getting beat up by drunkards, right? So all the feminists were lamenting the problem of the drunkard's wife, right? And then if she went out of the home to work, well, women were just given the worst jobs, terrible work conditions, menial labor, and possibly prostitution. So Susan B. Anthony talked about this double bind that women were in, where if they stayed in the home, they were subject to beating and sex being forced on them, basically rape, right? She called it lust, but it was basically rape. And if they went outside of the home, they were subject to these really horrible capitalist, and sexist working conditions.
I'm going to stop it there, because once again, check that out. I would also suggest you take a look at Murray Rothbard's The Progressive Era for more info on that, and how that kind of thinking and the push from liturgical and some of these, the conflict in the religious sects coming through in the Progressive Era, and then the women like Susan B. Anthony and others really helped form the Prohibition Era. So not necessarily good, but why were they involved, and how did that affect itself? Anyway, another great interview there. Hotep Jesus has been on there. Bridget Fedesi, Lily Foster and her boyfriend that was killed down in Acapulco area. Michael Bell Sr., son was executed by the police, and he's done some really great work. Katie Herzog. Look, there's been a vast amount of people on Thad's show, and you should really check it out. That's what I'm saying. So next episode, I think we will talk about, I think I'm going to do a little feature about Murray Rothbard and his take on the COVID-19 epidemic and how he would react to it. I think I have a little bit of understanding from that. One of his books, we'll talk about, what's the name? It's where he goes against, it's all flipped my mind now, but we'll check that out. We had Liberty Lockdown. We did Keith Knight. We've done Thaddeus Russell. I'll have better notes on the next one. I do promise. I appreciate you joining us here. Episode 6 of the Libertarian Podcast Review. As always, subscribe, share the show via iTunes, Stitcher. I don't think it's on Stitcher. It's on Anchor. It's on YouTube. It's on Odyssey. All right. Take care, everybody.